Thanks for joining, everybody. Our next edition of Leadership and Legal. We'll get started live in about 4 minutes. You're either watching this on Zoom, Facebook Live, or LinkedIn Live, but we'll get started in about 4 minutes. Gentlemen, unmute yourself. Welcome.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Here.
So thank you for joining. We are live. We are streaming on Zoom. We are streaming on LinkedIn Live, and we are on Facebook Live for anybody who wants to join us from any of those areas. So I appreciate you guys taking the time for another session of Leadership and Legal.
Hey,
Happy to be here.
happy you guys brought me back. I guess I didn't ruin the place after my last time. So that's good.
We're glad to have you back. James and I have been doing this now for many, many, many months. You were on, Dan, a couple of weeks ago when we did this, 3 weeks ago when we did this. And we're glad that you could come back because I think there's so much more to talk about. And I've shared some of the questions with you and James that have been posed over the past couple of weeks. And there's some doozies in there again.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure.
But for anybody joining us the first time, we do this once a month. It's a live discussion about all things related to HR and business leadership. We've got attorney and partner James Reid. I think most people in the Michigan area know James Reid. If you're looking for a great employment attorney, that's my shameless plug for James. And of course, Dan Russell. Dan is the Director of National Corporate Sales for Tryon. Everybody knows Tryon, a PEO here in the local marketplace, but working basically all across the country. So we've got two senior rock stars here.
Thank you, Steve. The feeling is mutual.
So for everybody, the idea behind this is we don't necessarily want to be politically correct about our opinions about some of these topics. What we're trying to be is professional, but trying to be as direct as possible. These are opinion and factual based discussions, right? Obviously, when you think about the law, James, very black and white, so to speak, on it's either right or it's wrong to a certain extent. But on some of these other things, it is our personal experiences and our personal opinions. But the idea is to flush out some of these topics that others are just not willing to talk about or cover it up a little bit. That's really the concept behind what we're trying to do.
Yeah, two things. One, I would say a lot of people would say there's a ton of gray in the law. I try to keep it black and white as much as possible. And I think we should introduce you, Steve. For those of you that don't know Steve Lowisz, he is at Qualigence International and is a keynote speaker internationally, and usually travels 5 days a week. But with COVID, we're able to, all be in Michigan and brainstorm and share some, thought leader ideas.
It's been interesting for all of us that are used to traveling. I know we've all been doing a little bit of it recently, but usually, as you put it, we're all on planes. We're all doing what we need to do, but at least we get to see each other via video. But this brings up actually a really good point, because we're in day 2 in Michigan of a new lockdown.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this a little bit, because some of the initial questions are actually related to that. So we have new COVID restrictions in Michigan and elsewhere. What do employers in Michigan specifically, James, this is to you, need to be aware of legally? Is the liability based on COVID getting bigger? James, I want you to answer that first to the group that's watching. And then Dan, I want you to jump in from kind of the people aspect of this. We're going to start with some of these general COVID questions, get into some more HR specific, and then I want to continue the conversation we had last time, specifically around race and some of the issues that are coming up. So James, why don't you take that first?
Yeah, this major update, basically there's probably no bar or restaurant attending for the rest of this year. It's at least 3 weeks in place, and it also applies to businesses. So there was this MIOSHA, webinar many of my clients and other attendees attended, and it scared the living out of everybody, saying that you can't basically work in the office if you could spend money and buy a license and buy a laptop and provide internet, and if there's any feasible way to work at home, you're not allowed to be in the office, was essentially the guidance. Here I am, I'm in the office.
I was waiting for that opportunity to say, what are you doing?
So I think the initial interpretation is a little bit over the top. There are exceptions if you need to be at work. So someone may need to still have access to the mail. Someone still may need to, prepare for trial and have access to a copying machine to prepare documents that you can do at a mass level. So I think you have to no longer do it on productivity, efficiency, and what is more convenient. You have to actually see, is there a business need that would make you want to be in the office or need to be in the office? And that's where there is the gray. So as much as it seems black and white, is it feasible is the gray term. And I think if you need to mentor a new hire and train somebody, have someone shadow you, it's pretty hard to do on a 8-hour electronic video chat.
So what about the repercussions of that? What if you're found in non-compliance with this? What could potentially happen? I know we're talking specifically in the state of Michigan, but from a legal perspective, what could happen to you?
So the most we've seen so far is fines of $25,000 and less for intentional violations. Theoretically, you could be shut down. So if you have some other MIOSHA safety hazard violation, think, if you were not having a safe working environment, theoretically, you could be shut down. I'm not aware of that happening yet. I think there's some flexibility because people are all learning and interpreting and figuring all of this out. But if you have employees that complain, there are employees starting to report their employer, MIOSHA will come to your premises. Number one, that's not a good look. And two, this is all published on social media. So MIOSHA has been shaming the companies that it finds and advertising it on Facebook, LinkedIn, social media, the news. So that social media liability is real. And there is a 21 states, to my knowledge, passed state immunity laws. If you follow your OSHA guidelines or your executive orders that may be in place, not in Michigan, then you have immunity from employees or contractors that sue you that claim to have been exposed to COVID at your workplace. So I think the biggest liability would be having to defend a lawsuit if someone died after having COVID symptoms and they blame it on you for not having a OSHA compliant workforce.
So Dan, but let's flip to you. James, thank you for the legal perspective on it, but let's talk about kind of the people perspective of this. I mean, I've seen some stuff on social media. People are freaking out about having to be home again for the next 3, 4, 6 weeks. James, you said potentially to the end of the year, and some are saying to the beginning of next year. I mean, what's the impact from a people perspective, a leadership perspective, an HR perspective from your side, Dan?
Well, it's challenging on both ends right now. You've got, half of the people that are saying, what are you talking about? Let's say, I'm a server at a restaurant and, I just started to climb back out of the hole that was created, a few months ago. And now just like that, with very little notice, I'm back home again and I'm unable to, take care of my family, with now even a lot of questions out there on the unemployment, because of course that piece that had been put in place to help with all of that has expired for most. And there's many more that it's expiring just after Christmas. So you have a lot of people right now that are very concerned that they've been sent home. And then you have a lot of people that, just like James was saying, they're saying, I don't feel comfortable coming into work. Clearly this is a problem. The numbers are on the rise and I'm not coming in. And my employer is forcing me to come in. Now you're getting this very, very precarious landscape, because as an HR director, you're telling these people to come in. As a business owner, you're telling them they have to come in. And you've got employees saying, hey, the law says I don't have to. That's not a good mix. And so we're seeing a lot of people challenge their HR directors, their owners, and really pushing the legal envelope. So I think James and his office are going to be very busy here in the next.
It's actually dividing the workplace just as much, if not more, than politics. I'm getting this call where, the guy didn't wipe down the refrigerator with a hand sanitizer cloth after he touched it, or the coffee. They're calling HR and complaining to the manager and telling on other employees for anything that they see. And now everyone, thinks everyone's working against them.
Yeah.
So you bring up a kind of an interesting point, because it was later on in the questions, but since you bring it up, James, is this idea of division that's going on. So let's kind of summarize, right? We had a pretty contentious election that went on. It doesn't matter what side of the coin you're on, you're entitled to your own opinion, but that seemed to divide people like I've never seen before, at least in all my 50 years of living, right? And I think you guys kind of agree with that. You've got the whole race issue that we'll get to here in a second that we started talking about in the last Leadership and Live. And now you've got, on top of all of this, or with all of this, and kind of adding fuel to the fire, is the differences of opinion on COVID. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to come in. You have to come in, and so on. Where is all this going? And from both of you, what's the advice that you would give to HR leaders who are stuck in the middle of this thing, CHROs, directors of HR, business leaders as well? But I want to focus on, what do you think? What should we be doing from an HR perspective, given it's the trifecta, the worst possible storm we could have?
Well, I'll start first, Steve, and I'll just say people need to take a deep breath, right? Take a deep breath and address people from a human element, right? Because first off, there's a lot of people that they're not avoiding coming to work. They're really scared. I talked to people recently and they've said, Dan, this is really starting to scare me. My best friend got it. My uncle got it. My parents got it, and now they're going, I feel like I'm just the last one left in a scary movie and I'm the next one to go, for one set of people, if it hasn't gotten close to you or it hasn't gotten bad, well, guess what? The COVID situation, you're like, it's okay. People are getting sick. But you talk to somebody who's lost a parent, a spouse, a child, guess what? It's a very different thing for them. And then the same thing with the race issue, right? You can talk to one group that they're not affected by this at all. But, James and I were speaking one time on a panel about this, and a woman in the back raised her hand and she said, I just wish my coworkers had have asked how I was doing. She said, because as Blacks, we were suffering through all of this. A lot of things over the years were just, it was like this wound was, the scab was ripped off, and there was a lot of pain. And I think even when you're out in society, unfortunately, there was this tension for a very, very long time. And it's still there in certain places that, people don't even want to talk to each other anymore. They're afraid to say anything to each other. And so what I'll say, and same thing with the election, oh my goodness. I mean, there were people that they just wanted to corner you and say, which one are you supporting? And I'm like, I'm not answering you. I'm like, I'll leave. Okay. I'm like, I am not about to get to a fight. But, as you said, Steve, in all of our years, I don't think we've ever seen people that supported a president or president-elect or nominee so passionately. And, for a lot of people, it wasn't even that they supported one or the other. It's that they just really didn't like the other one so much.
Yeah.
So that really brought a lot of anger and animosity. So my advice that I'm giving to people is take a deep breath. Try to take a evaluation of where is this other person coming from? Are they reacting out of fear? Are they reacting out of ignorance? Are they reacting because maybe as an organization, you haven't communicated with them? Maybe they're just concerned, is our company struggling? Where are we going? What are we doing with these new laws? And that promotes fear. And so when you take a deep breath and you just try to talk to people and relate to them, a lot of times that will disarm the situation. But the old saying, it takes two people to have a fight.
That's true.
Sometimes just stop and listen. And you'll find that, sometimes people are coming from a good place, and you can actually help them if you're not so argumentative right out of the gate.
That's actually a really good point. James, what about from your perspective, practical advice, as Dan put it, kind of, have the conversation, take a deep breath, take a step back. Is there some more practical advice you give?
The best practical advice I'm seeing is you make the employees more educated on how the business operates and what provides them with job security and a profitable business. And if you redirect them saying, look, when you're working at home, you're either efficient or not efficient. When you're working here, you're either efficient or not efficient. And when you are dividing the workplace, that creates inefficiencies. So I would maybe, now that we've had maybe 6 months of stats and could show what has worked and what hasn't worked, I think redirecting everybody on what our goals need to be and how to achieve results at a high level is a way to get everybody on the same page. So focus on, the job description, the task at hand, and kind of treat it like a disability. How can I help you accomplish these goals and invest in the people?
What about the issue of, so let's take us out of it, right? I mean, the three of us can have a conversation. We've shown that we don't always agree on everything. And I think there's value in not agreeing because it challenges the other person. But if I'm a head of HR or an HR leader within an organization, and you two are my employees, and the two of you keep going at it, what am I supposed to do? I can't really be in a position to take sides. So what's again, getting kind of back to practical recommendations, what advice are you giving me as an HR person I get talking about efficiencies and all that, but I'm in the middle of a fight. How do I deal with the fight that's going on between two of my top employees that are just outside of the distraction of what's going on, actually do a really great job?
Sure. So, I saw your Facebook post recently, Steve, about how you don't just hire on the job description, you want the heart. And so some of the people that aren't wiping down the, refrigerator or the coffee pot aren't intentionally evil. It's not a habit that they've developed. That's a rare thing in their life. So I kind of, as long as everyone is meaning well, from what I could tell as an HR perspective, I would try to, if someone was uncomfortable, it's not productive to keep them at work uncomfortable. I would accommodate them to work remotely. And that person that, needs to be here, I'd find a way to make him comfortable being here and not bothered by everyone that's going to nitpick. Maybe find a way to give him a private space where, he's not around as many other people. I think that my goal is to empower the people to be as productive as possible. And as far as picking sides, I agree that's a challenge, because there could be two competing protected classes, and you're exposing yourself either way. So the best thing to do is to try to sometimes separate the situation, or, from a leadership perspective, you train them how to interact in a more professional way. Maybe by asking questions to each other, maybe by, unilaterally coming up with a solution and not just coming to you with problems. So you'd rather train the employees to bring solutions.
James, correct me if I'm wrong, but I even look at it almost like I hope I don't offend people with this analogy, but it's almost like a sexual harassment claim within the office, right? If, Steve compliments me on my shirt or my pants and says, "Oh, you're, whatever," and I go, "Wow, that made me feel a little uncomfortable." Or if I'm a woman,
actually, I really like your handkerchief, Dan. It matches your shirt and that ensemble. It's really cool.
Thank you. And I tried to color coordinate with the wall today as well. So, but listen, I joked with somebody the other day at my office, and he had just come back from Florida from a golf trip for a few days, and I know him really well. And I went, "Man," I go, "slow down here. You just passed me." And we can laugh and joke about that, but my goodness, if I said that to one person, and let's say as a white male, he said, "Wow, Dan, you really offended me, when you said my tan was darker than yours." Oh my goodness. I mean, things like that within a workplace, it doesn't matter if the person was right or wrong. It matters the perception. And if a female is made to feel uncomfortable because of the way you complimented her or something like that, as James said, you can't just say, "Oh man, that's John. John, he means no harm." Well, that'll get you in court really fast. No different than if somebody said, "Hey, Susie made a black joke at lunch and it really offended me," or, made a comment about Biden or Trump. And, I just really thought that was a racist statement. I'm pretty offended. Well, you can't just say, "Hey, no big deal. It's just John." You have now created potentially a hostile work environment for that employee. And if you don't address it, you again could end up in court for something like that. So, Steve, to answer your question, and James said it well, sit the two individuals down individually, try to talk through it, get through some of the emotional baggage, and then get to, okay, hey, let's agree that we're going to disagree. I'm not telling you need to change your opinion, and I'm not going to ask this person to change theirs. However, I will ask you to treat them respectfully, because that's the culture that we have here at our organization. And I'm going to ask that person to do the same with you. And then, you have to enforce it. And you have to say, if one person still continues to push it or have conversations with others, making that other person feel uncomfortable, well, then you've got yourself an issue.
Yeah, one of the things that this has shown me, and this is just with anybody that I connect with and those conversations that I've had, is we're very emotional beings, right? Just think about it. We're responding to the election, we're responding to COVID, we're responding to racism, often on a very emotional level, which only causes greater problems. I'm not saying to discount it, but there's something that I was talking to a leadership team about that I was developing this morning, and I may have mentioned it on this video before, is facts, feelings, focus, fruit. Okay, what are the facts of the situation? James, why do you believe the way you do? Dan, why do you believe the way you do? Okay, let's get to the facts, and we can agree that we can disagree in some of those things. And then recognize the emotion that it's stirring up in us, but don't respond to emotion first, right? So that's facts, that's feelings. And then focus. What do we want out of this? We want a non-combative work environment. We want to be okay to believe the way we believe, right? So then the last piece is fruit. What's our way forward? How do we do that? It's like basic 101 playground stuff, but it just seems in the last couple of years that nobody's following that, and it's feelings, which we don't want to discount, but we need to acknowledge, I think, in a different way. What's your guys' take on that?
That's exactly what I train. So I call it the 7 W's. So you start, don't give me the conclusions, bully, retaliating, discriminating, harassing. Give me the who, what, where, when, why. Give me the facts, which is your F word.
Lawyer.
And then next, the lawyer in me wants to know witnesses, so that way I can kind of understand what's going on. And then the want. So that's the 7 W's, which is like your fruit. How do we fix this? And then I try to teach them to communicate with the I message. So you talk about how you feel. I feel this way, not you suck, you did this wrong, because that's going to create more of a friction and a rivalry. So I try to do with the 7W, or start with the thumb method, not the finger. So similar concept.
And Steve, I think you said it best when you said, it's the old playground thing, right? When you're a kid, at a certain point, it's okay that everybody's not going to look the same. We're not all going to agree. We're not always going to have the same thoughts. Sometimes you have to take people back to that and just say, hey, Steve, I understand you and James are arguing about this, and one of you is a Trump supporter, one of you is a Biden supporter, and hey, I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that both of you are, exercising your constitutional right to vote and support, and that's a fantastic thing. But Steve, come on. Everybody in the world's not going to think like you. And James, man, I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to argue and all of a sudden you're going to make Steve believe the way you believe?
Right.
Probably not. So,
I agree.
Stand for something, walk your walk, talk your talk, but you don't have to force other people. It's no different than religion. Hey, fantastic. You're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Jewish, fantastic. I the other day, I had somebody at our office. We celebrate so many different cultures, and we celebrated Diwali, which is the festival of lights. And, I sat down with, one of our executive members, and I said, tell me more about it. I said, why is it called the Festival of Light? And he said, oh, well, it's because the King Ram came back after 14 years, and he's going on and on and on. And he tells me about how they lit butter because it was dark when he came back, and instead of candles, they used something like butter. And he said, that's why it's the Festival of Lights. And then he started to tell me about why they do certain things, and it was fantastic. So instead of going, and why are we celebrating this? Hey, why didn't we do this on June 19th? Why didn't we have ethnic food for this? And hey, why didn't on Cinco de Mayo? Why didn't we, right? And, all of a sudden you start to get, as James said, it's all about me instead of, well, just take a step back and go, wow, this is awesome. Let me learn. Let me maybe understand where you're coming from. And at the end, it doesn't mean I'm going to leave my church and switch my religion. It just means I learned about somebody else, listened to their perspective, didn't try to shoot it down. And, we can all live and coexist together differently. That's what makes America beautiful.
And another challenge is that more now than ever, the disputes are with the same rank and file employees. So they're not used to a coworker telling them what to do. Kind of like the playground. Why is another kid in my class telling me? They're not my teacher. They're not my mom or dad. So it's kind of like that way in the workplace where they aren't used to someone telling them how to have sanitary, good hygiene conditions. And that's creating a whole new level of conflict. So to resolve that, you may want to recommend having HR circulate a policy and a reminder and not single out any one person that is the violator, because that could create more tension.
Yeah, I think for all of us, it's about understanding the other perspective, and I think we've kind of forgotten that in society. So anytime I have an HR leader who's calling me to say, "What the hell do I do about this?" It's, well, what questions have you asked of the team? What questions have you asked of the two individuals, and what are you doing that? So there's a legal side, there's a non-legal side, but they're so related to each other. I want to go back to a legal question, James, if I could throw this back to you, because this is coming up in big time. When the vaccines are made available, we've got two, Moderna and Pfizer, that supposedly are 90-some% great, supposedly, right? We don't know yet. But once it's approved to be administered, then what? Can employers at that point mandate legally that their employees take it in order to come back into the office?
Yes, they can. So there's a case law where someone said it's against my medical beliefs to get the flu vaccination, and they refused to do so because they thought maybe it causes autism or isn't good to inject foreign chemicals in your body. And the court was very clear that medical beliefs are not a protected class. So the only exception to the answer is if for some reason your religion, which I'm not aware of any religion that would prohibit it, that would be something you would evaluate if there's a way to accommodate someone with that religious belief. Or if somehow there was a disability where you got a doctor, no, it's going to kill me if I get, this vaccine, I can't get it. So outside of a disability or religious claim, you can force it.
Okay, let me ask the follow-up question to that, Dan. Should we?
Whew. Tough question. Listen, I'm going to tell you, I think there's a lot of people that have a fear of, okay, great, we rushed to get this. Congratulations, but we don't know the long-term effects. We don't know, well, hey, what happens if this person takes this trial in 12 months from now, there's complications. we haven't had it for 12 months. They haven't tested it for 12 months. I mean, now, obviously, I think we're maybe coming up on 12 months of them getting started on this. But I think there's a lot of people that are very concerned with the long-term effects. And again, I think this is going to be another huge issue where there's a line drawn in the sand, and you're going to have people say, you're taking my constitutional rights, and I don't have to take this vaccine, just like I don't have to wear a mask. And, it's what a lot of people are getting frustrated about right now. Think about it. All these people said, you can't tell me I have to stay at home. And now you're telling me I have to wear a mask. And now you're telling me I have to shut my store down. How dare you? Who, governor, president, Senate, House, how dare you tell me as an American what I have to do? That is what you're going to see a lot of people upset about. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong. I think it's a personal opinion. And I think you really should consult with your physicians, to talk to them, people who you trust, and see what their feedback is. I've spoken to some doctors that have said they're going to be first in line to take it. And I've spoken to some physicians that are saying they're not ready to jump on the bandwagon yet.
So, James, what about that was your legal answer. Dan, I appreciate you being honest. What's your kind of non-legal answer? What's your thoughts, or do you have any?
It's very similar to Dan. All the articles I'm reading are saying it's not best practice to force it in most scenarios. Maybe a hospital would be more prone to force that policy, but outside of that, could you accommodate those workers by having them work remotely until everyone else is vaccinated? Could you potentially, maybe what you say is, I guess I would want to try to do it a case by case scenario. So I guess I'm not recommending forcing it.
Yeah, I would just be very frank with it. I won't force it. There's no way, because it's one thing to say, hey, put a mask on the outside of your body. If it doesn't affect you, that's one thing. To force somebody to put something in their body to come back into the office, I just can't see any reason to do that, period. Now, this is my personal opinion. I'll get lambasted for it, but this is part of the conversation that we're supposed to be having, right? I just don't feel right in putting it in. Look, I'm okay with I wear the mask. I don't like it, but it makes other people feel more comfortable. I'm cool with that. This is just my opinion, but I can't see forcing somebody sticking a needle in their body in order to come back into work, especially if they feel that it's something they shouldn't do. Just
it's interesting. It goes back to, the kindergarten. My kids have to get certain vaccinations to be allowed in the school. So it's interesting.
I particularly have an issue. Now, I don't care if you do it. I did it, but I don't particularly care if that's a choice that you don't want to make, to put something in your body. It's a foreign substance. You're injecting it in. Should that be right? I don't believe so. I know there's a case on the other side, but that's part of our discussions. Again, why we're having some of these. Thank you for that. Let's switch gears a little bit. It's still related to HR, and it's taking all this in. We know 2021 is going to be challenging. At least the beginning of 2021, we'll be just coming off, hopefully, of COVID and the election and everything else that's happening. But from an HR perspective, it seems that 2021 is all going to be about, let's figure out a way to get our teams to perform again. It's been an unsettled year with everything going on. And then it seems to me that 2022 is probably going to be more about retention, because 2021 is going to be, let's get people back to work. Let's do all those things, which we're already starting to do that. And then in 2022, to me, it just seems like it's all going to be about retention and engagement. It's there now because of the remote workforce, but I think it's going to be bigger. Given those two items, first of all, does that seem to resonate well with you? And secondly, what's the specific advice you'd give to either an HR or business leader that's practical, that regarding those two items in 21 and 22, or whatever combination that happens? Because I think those are going to be big issues.
Well, Steve, what I'm going to say is you will reap what you sow. So
what do you mean?
You've done this year through all these challenges. That is what's going to determine what your workforce looks like in the next 2 years. Were you open with your staff? Did you communicate with your staff? Did you talk about the good and the bad, right? I'm telling business owners, it's okay to have a conversation with your staff to say, hey, we are down 10 million in revenue this year because of COVID. Now, that's not saying that we're laying people off. That's not saying that we're shutting our doors, but we're down 10 million. So as a team, we need to rally and all do our different parts to help get that 10 million back and continue to move forward. And hear what our plans are as an organization. listen, when you say that to somebody, they feel like I'm a part of the team. This is something we're working on together. But I've seen a lot of organizations that are being very secretive. They're not being very open with their employees. And the employees are not dumb. The employees recognize that, hey, we used to have thousands of people coming in the restaurant. Now we have hundreds of people coming in the restaurant. We used to have, 30 people working a shift. Now we have 15 people working a shift. They're seeing people leave. They're seeing a lot of, negative, and they're confused. They're wondering what's going on. They're waiting for someone to communicate with them. Also, even the way you handled the furloughs, right? Were you respectful about it? Did you sit down and have a conversation with your employees to say, listen, these are unprecedented times. This is not something we want to do, but this is something we have to do to make sure you have a job to come back to, and that after we get out of this, that our plan is sustainable. When you have that conversation, and it's one thing to send out an email, and now you and James are sitting there saying, what do you mean we're furloughed and tomorrow I'm not supposed to come in? Like, what do you I just talked to Dan, our HR director, yesterday, or I just saw the CEO walk down the hallway, and you didn't say anything to me. You didn't, no conversation, just an email or just a phone call. Don't come back in. Or, even, hey, are we allowed to work from home? Do we have to keep coming in? There's some organizations that are just saying, hey, this is what it is. Well, you know what? In 2021, that's not going to fly anymore, because let's call it what it is. And Steve, I know you are seeing this just like we are at Tryon. Like never before, people are saying, I need good people. I find them. They're not out there. I'll pay them more. What do they need? I need good people. What I don't see is a line of people saying, I'm looking for a job. Now, we're about to have a little bit of both, because some of these industries are going to go away completely. Some of these jobs are going to go away completely. But then on this other hand, you've got people saying, I'm looking for talented people. Well, those will be married. But to your point, Steve, retention. Keeping your good employees, listen, there's a hot job market out there right now. So that talented James Reid in your office, you better make sure he's happy. And you better make sure that you treated him respectfully and you thought about him through all of the changes, because otherwise James Reid is getting a phone call from, 3 or 4 high-level recruiters, and he's going to wave by here shortly.
James, before I turn it over to you, can I ask a follow-up question, Dan? And
Sure.
You just said that, there's kind of a hot job market out there, but you got thousands and millions of people that are on unemployment, and they're listening to this, if they're watching it, saying, crap, I haven't had an HR job in the last 6 months. What the hell are you talking about? Tell me where these jobs are at. How do you respond to that?
Listen, what I'm going to say is, and all right, I'm glad you asked that. This is something that I have taught to college classes. I've mentored people on this. Why are you different? Right now, you're posting your resume on the Indeed board, and guess what? It says the same thing as everybody else's. Guess what? Steve's organization is not going to find you. They're not. There's going to be 1,000 people that look just like you. What are you doing that's different? What on your resume says, hey, I'm more than just a CHRO. I also volunteer here. I did this. I implemented this in my organization. I did all of these things. What was your follow-up to the organization? Did you send an email? Did you send a handwritten note? Those things go along.
A handwritten note? What are you, in the 70s?
Oh my goodness. It's the big one, Alice. It's crazy.
I've done that for 28 years. So few people do things like that anymore, to your point.
And you know what? It's not hard. I can find out who the head of HR is. I can find out who the hiring manager is. And hey, maybe you still don't get the job, but show that you're different. Show that you're willing to do one more thing that the other person isn't. If you're trying to hire someone in design, or IT development, okay, great. Why wouldn't you send me a portfolio pack? Send me something that says, hey, just wanted to send you a link to some of the websites I've developed. Hey, here's some pictures of some of the things that I've done. Why not? If you truly think you're that good, show me, don't tell me.
And 86% of executive jobs are from word of mouth. So what the audience should be doing is getting to know the three of us especially Steve, with your staffing business, so that you are top of the pile when they are being recommended for a potential position.
Yeah, we see in the high 80% as well. That's actually a good point. But James, go back to the initial comment around, okay, 2021 is kind of the engagement, focusing on performance. 2022, potentially retention, or maybe even now in 2021, as Dan was saying. Is there any other specific advice that you would give to HR, given where things are going, or business leader, given where things are going from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I liked where Dan was going, that the 2021 and 2022, while your themes seem spot on, are very dependent on how employers handle the rest of 2020 or how they've handled it thus far. So if there are people, like, for example, Dan and I are having our all-time record busiest years with everything going on right now. If we're working 20% more hours and getting 25% less pay, we're not going to be that happy. Right. So if you are having if you're having rock stars that are rocking out best productivity of their life, working more hours than ever, I would not want them to suffer as much as the average worker that isn't carrying their weight. So I think this is a year to treat your rock stars like rock stars, or at least distinguish the overachievers from the underachievers. I think is an important lesson for this year. And to your point, Steve, without being in the office, the team may not feel as loyal because they're not seeing you every day. And now you're almost like a commodity. I can work remotely and call these people up for any overhead shingle. So I think we got to do a better job keeping our culture and our engagement in 2021. Otherwise, we're going to have serious retention issues in 2022. But I think if the rock stars are not getting bonused out this year, there's going to be serious retention issues at the beginning of 2021.
And James, to that point, Steve and I have talked about this before. Listen, organizations now doing this flat bonus at the end of the year. I'll never forget a couple of years ago, I'm driving down the street. I'm not going to say the automaker's name, but one of the big automakers had given like a flat 3% bonus to everybody at the end of the year. And I went, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because you've got little Johnny over here who's been showing up late every day and doing just enough to not get fired. And here's Susie who's knocking the leather off the ball, and you just gave them the same bonus. Susie's going to go, why don't you go jump in a lake? I'm done with this. And then Johnny's going to go, hey, it's working. I got a bonus. I put a pool in the backyard. Everything's good, right? Those things don't work anymore. That's the old school way. And James, Steve, you, all of us, we all get those same questions. Well, how do I do this? There's some really great tools out there now where you can actually do nice reviews and two-way, checks with your employees. So you're even making sure your supervisors are actually doing a good job at managing their employees. So at the end of the year, you're seeing, well, who ranked out a 5 and why? Not just I gave him a 5 because I had to redo James's review and, hey, run a little late for lunch. It's 11:40. Hey, James, you've done a hell of a job, buddy. There's a 5.
But in order for that to happen, you got to be clear about the expectations. You got to be able to measure the expectations and communicate that you are hitting or not hitting those expectations. I think this is for next month's discussion, but so many organizations that can't actually put any type of goal or measurable metric on a job, and then they wonder why the person doesn't actually perform to the job. When it's that ambiguous, there's too many people that just don't operate in that. But that's kind of a whole different issue. And then the other thing I'll just mention, and both of you kind of said this, is we spend more of our time in HR dealing with the problem people than we do supporting the rock stars that can become triple rock stars. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that I think we explore on the next one. But I want to, if it's okay with you guys, we started a conversation last month, Dan, when you first joined us, and James and I have been talking about it because, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think there's some important questions that have come up that I was actually afraid to ask about race because it's on top of everybody's mind. And Dan, you told some good stories. James and I have been talking about this. James, you do a lot of coaching and training around racial issues and so forth. But I want to come to what was sent to me. This is not me. I want to make that very clear because I'm almost hesitant to ask a few of these questions, but I'm going to do them anyways, because that's the whole point of this. one of which I'm not afraid to. We started talking about last week, but there was a follow-up that was sent to me or last month. And this was around tying leadership bonus compensation to diversity things. And James, I know that technically that's not legal. I think was, and I'll let you describe that again. But the follow-up comment was, some of these large organizations are making it very clear we are so committed to diversity that we're tying our executives' compensation to specific diversity numbers. And I did a little research since the last time, and they're making it very public. That doesn't seem to jive with some of what we talked about last month. James, kind of take that and run with that a little bit.
Yeah, so the illegal piece is if you have quotas. So if you specifically want a certain number and target that, that is illegal. Although I am seeing also ties to compensation, but with a little bit of a legal compliance twist, which is there's actually a business ROI on having a diverse workforce, because you're going to be able to reach a more broad, diverse market audience most of the time. And there are clients, like some of our largest clients at Dinsmore are saying, we need you to be more representative of the population to get more of our business. So okay. I think if without a quota, if you are trying to attract diverse talent, you're going to get more business from a lot of your clients, and the executives should be rewarded on the business development, not on specific numbers and quotas. So,
but in some of these instances, they're saying we're going to go to X% diversity in this group, and that's how we're going to get our bonus. Because how else do you tie a bonus to it? Right. So isn't that already fighting what you're saying?
I am not advising any of my clients to get to a certain percentage of diversity.
All right.
So
Fair enough.
There are legal risks. I haven't seen that particular plan come across my desk, but I would raise some legal issues if it was that black and white.
Dan, what's your perspective on this?
Listen, I don't think we have to tie bonuses to it. I just think if it's an objective of the organization, be clear about it, be surgical about it, be intentional about it. And if you get the team's buy-in, then, again, we may be bonusing somebody out because they've worked their tail off this year. And maybe we added something to their plate. Like James said, maybe you're taking a rock star CHRO and they stepped up and added a little bit more. And now they're sitting on a diversity panel, and maybe they went and took this course. Maybe they're doing some training. Well, you took that person who was already busy with COVID and everything else that's been going on, and you just added some more to their plate. Okay, well, great. If you want to give that person a bonus because of that, absolutely, 100%. You have a rock star like James just talked about, an even bigger rock star, right? Bonus them on that. Don't bonus them because you hired 5 Latinos and 6 African Americans and, 10 gay, lesbian individuals, right? No, because now you're getting back to now we're hiring people for that reason instead of hiring the most qualified person. You're going to miss your mark. And I think you said it best, Steve, a few minutes ago. What's your objective? What are you really trying to do? Are we trying to bring the right people into the organization? Are we trying to, make a more diverse population within our organization? That's great, but let's still make sure we're not losing sight of our values. I showed both of you two. We've got a value wall in our office, and there's a lot of things on there about being leaders and innovative, but right on there it says values. So if we've become a leader and we've now missed out on our values, you got to take a step back and say, well, wait, we have to reevaluate. So I would say the same thing to an organization with 10 people or 10,000. Take a step back and say, what are you really trying to accomplish? It's great to increase diversity, but don't lose your culture trying to promote culture.
And on that note,
that's actually
you got to consider promoting from within. If you're just finding all these outsiders that aren't in the culture and didn't earn their way, and you're not promoting the rock star and leaving them there, that's going to create other issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask another question, kind of related to it, but in a different way. And I got this. Probably 4 or 5 people asked it in different ways, and this just came in the last couple of days, actually. And I don't think it's a fair question, but I think it's a question that still needs to be asked. Dan, I'm going to ask it of you initially to start. And it says, "What do employees of color want to see in the workplace?" And here's how I'm going to rephrase the question: Dan, you are a person of color. We've already established that. What do you want to see in the workplace?
Well, I give credit to my wife because she corrected me one time when I was helping someone that was telling me that they didn't see me as Black.
Mm.
Talked about this last time. And I said, I want you to see me as Black. And what she said is, I don't want you to treat me differently because I'm Black. And I said, wow. I said, people don't take the time to say that. We want to be accepted. Now, in an organization, and I've been in corporate America a long time, there's several times that I was the only Black executive sitting at a table. There were times at conferences where there were executives from all around the country, and I'm working for a large bank, and I look around the room, and I'm the only Black face there. Okay, now I recognize that I'm opening doors for others, but what I don't want is don't give me a token promotion. Don't give me, this, oh, well, we had to do something. Oh, hey, we're going to pick Dan. He's Black. That'll look good. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants this free ride. Nobody wants a free victory because deep down inside, you didn't earn it. Now,
but can I just interject real quickly?
Yeah.
Because I even find this on non-African Americans, friends that I went to high school with. Some people actually do want that. They do want it handed to them. Are you saying that
those are the people you want in your organization, period? Right?
Okay. All right.
I'm putting together a football team right now. I don't want the guy that says, hey, I don't want to show up to practice, but I want to play. And by the way, I want to start. And in fact, I think I should be the quarterback too, but I don't work for it. Guess what? I don't care how talented you are. I don't want you on my team, right? So it gets back to what I just said. Don't lose your culture trying to promote culture.
Sure, yeah.
Listen, and you just said it best, Steve. We're talking Black, white, Native American, Indian, Haitian, Mexican. It doesn't matter. You're going to find a ton of people that say, I don't want to work for it. Just give it to me. Hey, the job because I'm Black and I showed up. That's not the person you want anyway. So now let's move past, we've gotten past those people that we don't want in our organization. And now we've gotten to the people we do want in our organization or we have in our organization. Well, treat me respectfully. I'm okay with you acknowledging I'm Black. Don't pretend that you don't see I'm Black. That's okay. It's okay. Like, nobody wants to feel like when you walk out of the room, everybody goes, oh, whew, all right, Dan's gone. Now we can really talk.
The Black guy left the room. We can talk about anything now.
Yeah, now we can tell the joke, okay? And listen, I'm speaking for women as well. I just sat down with a very, very successful HR professional in my office the other day, and she talked about the glass ceiling at her own organization. And she said, there's no opportunity for me to become an executive at my organization because I'm a woman. She said, they're all the same. And this is a white woman speaking. And she said, entire executive team, all white males. She said, it's the good old boy club. And come on, we all talk about it. We've all heard about it. People feel that way. So if you have someone in your organization that's a person of color, guess what? Talk to them. Get to know them. Talk to them about their family. Talk to them about where they're from, where they went to school. It's okay to find out about that person. And you may find out you're more alike than you realize. And then you may find out some of the differences or maybe some things that could help you become more well-rounded. But I think people right now, when they talk about equity, they talk about inclusion, listen, people are just asking for a seat at the table. They're not asking for you to promote them when they haven't earned it, but don't overlook them. And also, I'm hearing a lot of executives come to me saying, hey, Dan, I'd love to have more minorities, people of color, Blacks, Asian, at the higher levels, but they just don't have the education or experience that we're looking for. And I'm challenging them in two different ways. Number one, I'm saying, if you're so driven and focused on how you've always done it, and you have this tunnel vision, well, you're going to keep getting the same candidates or the same things going to keep happening over and over. Maybe you have to take a step back and say, maybe I'll look at some different places. Maybe I'll recruit in some different areas. Maybe I'll take a look at a HBCU, which is a historically Black college or university that don't know. Maybe I'm going to go down to Morehouse or Spelman or somewhere like that and see some of these talented individuals. Maybe I'm going to go to U of D, Wayne State. There's so many great colleges that are very diverse, but now maybe I'm going to start to fish in a different pond. And then other than that, though, the last thing I'm going to say is people have to stop and say, am I allowing people to grow within my own organization? If I have not put a growth tracking plan in place for that person who now is at an entry level or a lower middle management level, if I have not shown them what the path to become an executive is, they don't know. And listen, I know some of you right now are going, oh, Dan, whatever. They don't know.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, you have people working for you that have no idea how to get to an executive level. And many of you are at an executive level because you simply asked one day. Or like James said, you knew the right person who said, hey, I got a great person. They'd be great as a vice president in your organization. And that person wasn't a vice president yesterday, but today they are.
Yeah.
That's how it happens. So Steve, I just say we've got to just communicate better and provide opportunities for people without giving a handout.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. James, before I ask the next question, do you want to put anything on top of that?
It's a dangerous topic to talk about, I agree. But I think on a broader perspective, I think executives got to see the full chessboard. You're dealing with 5 different generations in the workplace, different races, different religions. If every single one of your employees is the same generation, same religion, or same race, if you have an outsider that you hire, they're not going to feel comfortable. So I think that they're going to notice on day one that it may not fit in your culture. At least that's going to be their initial impression. So if you want to break down those barriers, just be more self-aware.
So let me ask a couple of other questions. And James, I'm gonna push this one to you first because there's a little bit of a legality, maybe. I was recently asked in an interview to answer this question. Okay, this is quoted: without using the word different, what's your definition of diversity? So here's the question. Is that legal? And if so, how would you answer that? Without using the word different, what's your definition of diversity?
So it is legal to ask that question.
Okay.
And, I focus on the solution. It's acceptance, coming together, one mission, people first. So I kind of would focus more on everybody coming together, but it's a challenging thing to do because you're basically embracing everybody for whoever they are, as long as they can help advance the business goals and mission.
Dan, what's your take on that?
That was a great answer by James. That's why he is one of my right there, because typically I would have bounced that question right to him. But, it's easy to describe diversity without saying differences. It's creating acceptance. It's creating a beautiful tapestry of people that resemble our world instead of our bubble, right? It is learning and understanding others and their cultures. And again, it keeps going back to acceptance and just broadening our horizon and our vision. Diversity is not black and white.
Yeah.
Diversity is people. That's it. And when we look at human resources, the first word is human. That's what it's about. Look at young, look at old, look at, male, female. I mean, you've got gender issues now. I mean, there's a lot that's going to change with this new election that we're going to see. And I mean, my goodness, there are people that are still struggling with marijuana being legal, right? There's people who are still struggling seeing 2 females married or 2 males married. And, listen, I remember being at Michigan State in a course one time, and it was a course on education. And now, mind you, we're talking, this is the early 90s, and the professor got up and said, well, what are you going to do when 2 fathers or 2 mothers walk into a classroom with their kid? And this young man gets up and decided it was his opportunity to stand on a soapbox and tell everybody how it was wrong and how, he wouldn't accept it. And then I raised my hand and I said, you should probably change your major. And the whole room turned and looked at me, and I said, listen, years ago, that question would have been, what are you going to do when 2 black people walk into your classroom with a black kid? And I'd said, so guess what? Now it's 20, 30 years later, and we're talking about two men walking in or two women walking in. And regardless of what you believe or what you accept, you are there to teach that child. No different than I'm going to say to a CEO, a CHR, a HR professional, you are there to take care of your employee. You are there to build the culture within your organization. So if you don't believe, that's okay. Maybe you were raised in an area where it was all one culture, one community, and you have not had the opportunity to have access to others. That's okay. But don't treat that person, as any sort of outsider just because you don't understand. And I made sure to not.
I think that's the key point to it, because we don't have to agree with everybody's lifestyle choices, but they're still human beings, and we need to treat them as human beings. So it is truly about, okay, how do we make it all work inclusively? Now, I still believe that you need to understand each other's differences. We've talked about that, and we need to be much more open about it. So I even take a little bit of offense to that question, because dang it, I want to talk about our differences because I learn more about you by understanding what the differences are. But that was the question. So there's kind of two more that I want to hit quickly. One, Dan, I'm going to throw to you, and then one, Dan, I'm going to throw to you, or one, James, I'm going to throw to you. But I'm going to start with you, Dan, and this is a touchy one. So I'm just going to read it. How come white people can't say the N-word, but many of my Black colleagues almost use it as a term of endearment? And for your information, I'm brown. This is the question. Now, look, some people are going to take offense to the question. I get it, but it's on somebody's heart, so I want to ask the question.
It's a valid question. What I'm going to say first is, if you talk to someone in an older generation, that word is going to hurt even more, right? If you talk in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, that word brings up some things that we haven't experienced. That word brings up an ancestor that was in slavery. That word brings up people who were hosed down or kept from going to schools. That word brings a lot of pain. Now, as the years have gone on, I'm going to say to the person who asked the question, listen, Black culture and Black music has used that word often. And, to some, it's even a term of endearment, right? It's how some would say, they say hello to each other. But what I would say is, that word, I don't use that word. I don't encourage my children to use that word. If you look up the definition of the word, it means ignorant person. So that is not something that I would say I'm going to describe as James or Steve or any friend. And what I'm going to say is, while one may say, well, whites can't say that, Blacks can't, I don't think anybody should use the word personally. I don't think Black, white, anybody else. And my goodness, we could have that question on so many different things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And where it's really sad. And again, I hope I don't offend anyone with this analogy, because again, this is not a term that I use. But, I've seen people who are on a golf course and they're joking, and a joke calling someone a cracker comes up, and it's okay. And I'm like, no, that's not okay. Like that's not okay. And I've heard someone use the term wetback, and I go, whoa. I'm like, don't do that. And they're like, oh, Dan, no, he's okay. And I go, no, I'm not okay. Yeah. So I asked if he was okay. I'm saying that's not how we talk to people. And so I think there's a certain point that we have to raise up our kids. We have to rise above some of the ignorance that has been acceptable over the years. Just because something was acceptable for years doesn't mean we should accept it today. And that is one of the things with the social injustice movement that's happening right now, that I am telling people, listen, I'm not saying everything that's happening through this is good. I think there's a lot of bad, unfortunately, with riots and some of those things, and a lot of hatred that's being spread. I do not condone that. However, I do believe that there are some things that are being raised that, yeah, it's gone on for years and it shouldn't anymore. And it's okay that we're addressing that. And that word is one of those things. I do not feel that anyone should, but guess what? Just like we talked about with other things, I can't tell you what to say. I can't tell you what to do. But to the person that says, why is it okay for that person to say it? black, white, yellow, purple, brown, I don't think it's okay for them to say it. Because at the end of the day, it's a disrespectful term that is a derogatory term. And I don't think that it brings any edification or improvement or love to anyone. I think it only tears down. So I would say to that person being brown, hey, why don't we get to a point where we say it's not acceptable? And it's not acceptable for anyone to say, regardless of your culture.
Next month, we'll talk about how to actually do that. James, I want to throw one last one your way. Dan, thank you for that honest answer.
Real quick, though, I think there's that legal answer to the last question. Is there was a multi-million-dollar lesson where a company allowed black employees to use the N-word with each other, and then a white employee made an inappropriate black joke saying that white desks are better than black. Then all of a sudden, that white employee was fired, and the white employee sued the company saying, you didn't fire the black employees for using the N-word with each other. And the employers, oh yeah, but they weren't offended. They were just joking with each other. Well, it doesn't matter. You're only enforcing your policy against the white guy, not the black employees. And the jury awarded millions of dollars to the white employee that used the inappropriate term. So you want to apply your policies to all, not just white employees.
And Dan, that's exactly what you were saying. Thank you for that legal perspective, James. I didn't even realize that was a case.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let me ask one more, and then we'll go. So here was the question, James. I'm a white person who wants to combat racism. Where can I start specifically in the workplace?
I think it's too hard in most workplaces to just do it internally. I think you have to hire outside experts because you're going to say something inadvertently wrong, be misinterpreted, or not be respected enough as an expert. Even the president of SHRM, who is black, said that he is not a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and doesn't want to be tokened as one just because he's black. So if you want someone in your workplace, hire an expert, not even him. So I think you got to hire an expert.
And James, I would even say experts.
Experts, correct.
So when you just, and I'm going to, shameless plug for even you too, right? So, okay, we've talked about trying to hire diversity. We tried to, finding a different pool of applicants that are talented. Hey guys, Steve, right there. That's what his organization does. Right? So guess what? Get outside of, I've been posting on Indeed and I'm just not getting the candidates. Well, guess what? If you don't change that, you're going to keep getting the same candidates. And maybe, and I'm sorry, I may offend a couple people, maybe your organization isn't attractive to diversity right now. Right. So maybe you have to take a step back and say, what am I promoting on my own social media? What does my website look like? If somebody looks on and says, meet the team, what is the team? If I say meet the team and it's a bunch of people I wouldn't even feel comfortable talking to at a restaurant, I'm probably not going to apply. So that's one. And then on the other hand, as James said, for some people that have kind of got the train going down the tracks on, hey, we're going to promote social equity and diversity and inclusion. If you are not consulting with an attorney or a law firm like James, Reid and Densmore, guess what? You are going to step in a pile of bleep. Okay, what? It's inevitable. I don't care who you are. You're going to put this really good mission statement out there, and you're going to say something that an employee is going to get a hold of, and it will end up in a court document when they now are saying, hey, I don't want to work here anymore. And hey, here's a really good way that I can get a golden parachute on my way out. Do not try to make decisions. And HR professionals, it's okay that you don't know because nobody taught you this in school.
Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to do this again today. I know we're talking about a lot of the same subjects, some of which we're kind of drawing out, but I think it needs to have a discussion. We did get a couple of comments as we were doing today. Can we start rolling in some other questions as well outside of those three, but related to HR? But here's what I'm going to say to any of you that are looking out there. You have the right to ask the questions. If you send them to James, send them to Dan, send them to I, we will address them live here. So I take the majority of where the sentiment is going. So if we get enough requests, we will absolutely address those other things as well. James, we close the same way every time. Your cell phone number for the audience who's looking or will see this later.
734-649-1313. Call or text.
Dan, if you feel like putting yours out there again, you did last time.
Absolutely, I will. And just so you guys know, James loves emojis. So if you send emojis, hearts, smiley faces, all that stuff, he gets really excited. Mine is 248-219-6360.
Mine's 734-837-8500. So listen, this is meant to just address some of these topics head on that are sometimes uncomfortable to have in the workplace. That's why we do this. If you have a topic, send it to one of us. If you want to keep your name anonymous, like most people do, we won't mention your name. If you want to come on and have a dialogue or a debate with one of us, all of us, feel free to do that too. In the spirit of, we want to talk about the differences and the different perspectives. We're not going to get into a pissing match, though. That's just not what we're going to do. And if you do, we'll shut you down. That simple. But if we're going to have a real conversation about our differences, that's what we're trying to affect here. And hopefully it's helpful to you as an HR person, as a talent person, and as a business leader. But again, guys, thank you as always. We'll be together, hopefully, at least James and I, and Dan, if you're able to make it in December, we'll send out the date in the next couple of days. December's kind of iffy because of the holidays, and then we'll be back on a normal schedule. So if you want to be a normal every so often guest, Dan, I think James and I would love to have you on, especially related to some of the topics, really all the topics. I don't even want to see, I'm pigeonholing you because you're black. How is that right, Dan?
Steve, I have to tell you, quick funny story. I was getting interviewed one day, of course, but all of this stuff was happening right after George Floyd, and my wife is just sitting there and she's like, are you getting sick of talking about this? Because I mean, it was like every phone call, every interview, that's all people wanted to talk about. And hey, you know what I'm going to say? It's okay. You know, I'm perfectly fine because I do know, just like most people can't go to anyone else and ask the question you just asked me a few minutes ago. They will not ask. They won't ask a coworker. They won't ask an employee. So great. If I can help in that area, but yeah, you know, I do know a little bit about a couple other things, and you know, maybe have done some international public speaking. I can cover a couple of topics.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things we want to roll in next month is the subject of driving performance, and not just of black or white, of everybody. And because that's really on, as we talked about earlier, it's on the top of minds of HR folks and business leaders. How do we do that, especially in this remote world? And I don't want to get into the ins and outs of remote, but I want to get into the ins and outs of people in our next session, and how are we driving that performance of folks. But again, guys, thank you. If I don't see you, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. If you're watching, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And any closing comments, and then we'll shut her down.
I just want everybody to continue trying to build your culture and communicate and ask questions. Don't use this as a time to just, be isolated. I think that's the worst thing you can do, not only for yourself, your career, but also your workforce.
Awesome. Dan, anything?
You know, I'll just say, stay positive, everybody. We're all going through challenging times right now. Focusing on the negative isn't going to help. You know, control the controllables, control the things that we can control, and do not ever lose sight of the fact we can make a difference. So whether it's reaching out right now by Zoom, a text, a phone call, because you can't see someone, do that. Do what you can do. And this will, God willing, be over sooner than later. But while we're in it, let's stay connected, even though we're socially distanced.
Well said, both of you. Again, thank you guys. Thanks everybody who's watching. We're going to sign